All right, but it is recorded, so I think we can get started. And
Yep.
It's just the intro part, so whoever joins later is not going to miss too many things. So maybe let's get started by introducing the team. We've already added some info to the agenda. Maybe I'll start and then I hand over to you, Peter. So the office hour we have today is for the group called Tenant Scale. I'm the product manager for that particular team. I'm based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And our team is currently working on building a horizontal scaling solution for GitLab to ensure that the product can keep growing at the rate that it does. We call this cells. I've also linked to the blueprint in the document if you're interested in learning more about that. And in order to achieve that, we're also working on introducing a different concept that we call organizations to the product. I've also linked to that document if you want to learn more. And some other things we oversee in our team are groups and projects in general, how everything inherits in groups and projects, workflows relating to becoming a member of a group or project, group sharing, and we also oversee the user profile page. So our domain is quite large, and I've also linked to the direction page if you want to learn more. And with that, I'll hand over to Peter.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Peter Hegman. I'm a senior front engineer on the Tenant Scale team, based out of Bellingham, Washington, which is in the northwest corner of the United States, kind of right between Vancouver, BC, Canada, and Seattle, Washington are the two big cities, and then there's a smaller little city that I live in. So I'm kind of mostly focused on helping build out the organization right now that Christina was just talking about, but also work on front-end related bug fixes and all the features that we support. And I linked to the page where we list out which features that the Tenant Scale focuses on, and then also just small or sometimes small, sometimes larger UX improvements to the areas that we already support. Over the next few months, hopefully be ramping up more with the organization and building that out, and so we're working on an MVC of that over the next few months, and that should be a pretty exciting thing to release. If you have any questions, let me know. And then we can move on to I think Christina has the next point and how you can contribute.
Yeah, I've added a bit of a section there with links to our backlog and to the specific community contribution issues. Because the area that our team oversees is really large, our backlog is also really large. So we definitely welcome any kind of community contributions from people that want to start with, or if you want to try something more complex as well. There's a lot of bugs that are like UX improvements that could be done that we will not get to at this point in time. We know that they're super annoying, but in the bigger picture, it's just something we don't get to easily. So especially those areas are really nice for first-time contributors to pick up. So we have a couple of easier issues selected there. If there's something that is not labeled as looking for or seeking community contribution, but you would like to give it a shot, you can also just tag me there to get in touch with the team, and we can help with adding an implementation plan to it, because sometimes it's a bit difficult also, depending on the complexity of the code base, to find a good starting point. So it's good if you get advice from the designers or the engineers to help you with the implementation suggestions, at least. So take a look there, and let's go to any questions if you have any about the team or community contributions in general. Let me know.
No questions, but I saw that it was a small group, so I just figured I'd thank you, first of all, for hosting this. I am a quality assurance professional, and I've always loved GitLab's process. So I thought I'd come in today and take a look at how you operate, especially when it comes to bug fixes and things like that, and perhaps find a way to contribute if I could.
I wanted to say thank you too. And I'm mostly interested in the live pairing to see what you have. I wasn't familiar with the tenant scale team at all. I've contributed to other areas of GitLab, but I'm slowly getting to know each of the other teams and everything. So it looks like you have a lot of open issues actually, which is great. And I might dive into those now that I know of the existence.
Thanks. Nice to meet you both.
Yeah, thanks both for your comments. Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can wait for a few more questions and comments, but yeah, we'll dive into a live pairing after this, and can also kind of go through like how you can contribute and a little bit of how we like look at bug fixes and how we approach them and that type of thing. So hopefully the live pairing can kind of go over some of those comments. But yeah, if anyone else has any questions or comments, go ahead. And if not, we can dive into the live pairing.
Yeah, we can also take questions as they arise during the pairing session. So maybe let's just get started.
Yeah, we can do that. So yeah, in the docs here, I've linked to an issue that is, I think, could be a good one to take a look at. So if you open that issue up here, I'm just going to share my screen so that everyone can see. So if you open that issue up, you'll see that in the right-hand sidebar, it has the label that says "Seeking Community Contributions," and that's a good way to know that it could be a good one to take a look at. Also, if you go to current backlog that Christina linked to, this might take a second to load because there's a lot. And then you could add the label is seeking. Oh. And you can filter by just all the issues in the tenant scale or any other group that you're interested in that are seeking community contributions. So that's a good way to take a look. And then you can also add the label of front end or back end if you're more comfortable with one or the other. So that's also a good way to filter them. Sometimes we have, unfortunately, multiple duplicate labels that need to be cleaned up sometimes. So yeah, that's a good starting point, is to filter by seeking community contributions and then front end or back end. Today we're going to focus on an issue that's a front end issue because I'm a front end engineer and that's what I'm more familiar with and what I work on generally. And hopefully it'll just kind of give everyone an idea of how you can contribute. But yeah, so then the next thing would be to, when you find an issue that you might think might be a good one for you, is to kind of just go through it. This one is pretty simple, so it doesn't have too much information in the description, but some of them might be a bit more complicated with steps on how to reproduce or designs and that type of thing. This one, and then also it's a good idea to just go through the comments and see if anyone else has worked on it or tried to fix it, has run into issues, that type of thing. But yeah, so this one is about the group overview page, which we go to GitLab.org. This lists out subgroups and projects. And if you hover over this icon, it says public. This group and public projects can be viewed without any authentication, which is correct. But if you were to find a project in here and hover over it, it would say this group and public, when it should say this project. So this is a pretty minor UX bug that we can take a look at fixing. And then the other thing that is helpful for when choosing an issue to work on is we try to add this implementation guide, or sometimes it might say like engineering guide or that type of thing, to help contributors figure out where to start, or if it's something that they might want to help contribute to. And so this one, like I said, is a fairly simple one. So it just kind of has a few links to some code as a starting point. And yeah, we can use that to get started. And yeah, if anyone has questions while I'm talking, just feel free to jump in or leave your question in the chat, or yeah, either one of those. And I can answer those or try to answer those. So yeah, the first thing that you would want to do to get started on an issue would be to figure out how you are going to like make the code change and then view it. There's a few different options. You could fork the GitLab project. I believe I've already forked it, but you could fork the project and then pull it down locally and set up what's called GitLab Development Kit, which would allow you to run GitLab locally. And I already have that set up. It looks, once you have it set up, it by default, it is available at localhost port 3000. And it'll have this little green GitLab logo instead of the orange one. And this is the performance bar that you can use for queries. And then, yeah, there's a bunch of like fake data that's seeded that kind of helps you work on different parts of GitLab. So that's one way you can do it. You can, if it's a simple change that you feel like you don't necessarily need local, like for example, maybe there's a typo or something that you're fixing. You don't feel like you need localhost setup. You can just work in the web IDE, which is pretty cool. And to do that, you would like go to a file. We'll just go to the README for now, just as an example. You go to the edit and then open in web IDE. Should open that file up in the web IDE. And this GitLab repo is a big repo, so it's a little bit slower sometimes. So yeah, you can just work directly in the web IDE if you're, for example, just making like a typo change or something like that. In this case, because we want to be able to kind of see what we're doing live, I'm going to do it in GitLab Development Kit. And it's not too, it is a little finicky sometimes, but it's gotten quite good, I think, in terms of simplicity and setting it up. So it's not too hard to set up. And yeah, if you go to the project, there is a like getting started page, and there's a one-line installation. So I think it, depending on how complicated the changes you're making, I think it is worth setting up. So yeah, let's get started on making some code changes, unless anyone has any questions about any of what I just talked about.
Oh yeah, if I can jump in real quick, Peter,
Sure.
and thanks for that overview. Another point of mention for our wider community members is we do have the GitLab community forks, which allows you, once you've joined the GitLab community, you can use a community fork, and then that way helps you bypass some restrictions on like CI minutes, or if you need a verification of a credit card. And a really cool thing is that it allows you to partner up and with other community members. So if you wanted someone else to join on your merge request to help you out, it's a little easier way of sharing that same community fork. And I can pop into the chat a link to the GitLab community forks if anyone's interested.
Sounds good. Yeah, so let's get started on trying to fix this bug. So I think I accidentally closed the issue, but let's pull it back up. I'm just going to close these tabs, clean up here. So yeah, let's get started here. So the first thing that I generally do is just check out a new branch from master. So I already have the project set up and pulled down. And then I'm on the master branch here. So I'm just going to do git check. And yeah, one cool thing in GitLab is if you use this little drop down here, it'll give you a branch name. If you use this branch name, when you push up the branch, it will, and create a merge request, it will automatically grab these labels and the milestone, like the meta information, so you don't have to add that manually. So that's kind of a nice convenience. And we can talk about labels a little bit later when we actually create the merge request, because that is helpful as well. And you'll get prompts if you're missing labels, and the labels are kind of how we categorize merge requests and prioritize them, that type of thing. So yeah, we'll check out a new branch. And yeah, like I said, I already have GitLab development kit running. So we will go to a group. And we want to find a group that has a project in it, which we might actually surprisingly not have one. Oh, here we go. This one has a project. So yeah, so here's the bug. This is a project, but it's saying this group and any public projects can be viewed without any authentication. And we want it to say this project. So in our code editor, so I also have this pulled up in my code editor, which is just VS Code. So we're on a new branch. So let's pull up this file that was linked to in the implementation guide in the code editor. So that, yeah, generally where I start is just the implementation guide, and then pull up the code and try and get comfortable with it and what's going on. And I am quite familiar with this part of the code base because I've worked in it quite a bit, so I do understand it, but there are bugs that I work on that I come into it and I'm not familiar with the code base, that part of the code base, so I have to kind of go through and figure out what's going on. So yeah, let's just do that to kind of understand what's going on here, and let's figure out how this part is being rendered. So for those that are familiar with Vue, this is a Vue component, and that's what we use on our front end, in a lot of parts of the front end, the newer parts. And this Vue component, which is called group item, is being rendered here. And admittedly, this is a little confusing because this component, which is called group item, also renders projects in this case. So that could be a bigger refactor in the future, but for now we'll just leave it. One tool that I use a lot for front-end development is the Vue Dev Tools, which you can get for Chrome, and it definitely helps to figure out how things are rendered. So in this case, we can use the Vue Dev Tools and click on here, and we can see that this group item component that we were just looking at in the code editor is in fact being rendered on this page. So we know we're in the right place. And then we can go up the tree here and see what parent components are rendering this, just to kind of better understand how it's working. So we can see that we have this main component is called overview tabs. And we can see that that's right here. And then that's rendering this component called GL tabs, which is coming from our component library called GitLab UI, which is just a little side tangent here. But yeah, we have this component library called GitLab UI where we have reusable components that conform to our design guidelines called pajamas. So this is what we try to use to get consistent UI throughout GitLab, so that all the styling is the same. So in this case, we have a tabs component coming from GitLab UI, and then this overview tab, or this, sorry, subgroups and projects tab is rendering this tree. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it's being rendered. And let's figure out how to fix this bug. So let's go back to the implementation guide. And so it says add this .isGroup check to line 104. So let's go to line 104 here. And we can see that there's this computed property. So in Vue, a computed property is it's kind of like a cached conditional or some logic that gets cached by Vue and can be used to kind of it can be a convenience and make the code more readable, but it's also cached, so it can improve performance. So in this case, we have a computed property called visibility tooltip. And if we search in this file for visibility tooltip, we can see that it's being added to this icon, which is the visibility icon. And in the UI, that's we can actually use the Vue Dev Tools to find this icon component. And there it is. And we can see that the title, which we were just looking at in the code, is set to this group, even though it's a project. So I think we found the problem. And so we need to conditionally change this tooltip based on if this component is rendering a group or rendering a project. And so it looks like the way it's figuring out if it's so what I just did was in VS Code you can command click to go to follow the import. So in this case, this constant is being imported from another file, so I can command click to go to it, and we can see that it's an object that lists out the descriptions for each visibility level. So if one is if it's public, then it shows this. If it's internal, it shows this. If it's private, it shows this. But we can also see below this, we have one that's defined for projects. And it's the same. It's just that it has different descriptions, which is basically exactly what we want. So I think what we need to do here is we just need to, what we need to do is, I'm just gonna make sure there's no questions in the chat here that I'm missing. So we need to check if it's a group or a project, and then use the correct mapping here. And the nice thing, and this was mentioned in the implementation guide, is we already have this check, this.isGroup. Yeah, so the data that we have in this component has a type. So there's this group prop, I believe. Yeah, so in Vue, there's a concept called props, which is, they have it in React as well. It's just data that's passed to the component that you have access to inside the component. In this case, we have a group prop that's an object. And on that object, there's a type attribute. And yeah, and like I said, admittedly, this component is a little confusing because it's talking about a group, but it also renders projects. And that's part of the reason why is because we have this kind of tree structure here that shows groups and projects. And so in this case, this is more of like a resource and it has a type, but in this component it's called a group. And the type is either, so item type, it's more of an item, and it's either a group or a project. In this case, we want to say return, so we could say if this is group, return the group visibility type, and then otherwise return, so we have to import this project visibility type. From the constant, and then we would just do the exact same thing. So now we're saying if it's a group, return the group tooltip. If it's a project, return the project tooltip. So hopefully if we go back here, it should have the correct tooltip now. Yeah, so now it says this project can be accessed without any authentication, which is what we wanted to say. So yeah, so I think we fixed the bug.
I've
we
got a
could-
quick question, if
Sure,
you
go
don't
ahead.
mind. Can you go
Yeah.
back to the VS Code
Sure.
file? Can you just briefly explain why the project visibility type is taking this.group.visibility as the argument? Is that referring to the group, the tab that
Yeah.
you've opened?
So maybe it might help to see like the data that this component has. So sorry, what is this called? Group item. So this component is called group item. So if we go into the view dev tools and find the group item component, we can see the props. And yeah, like I was saying earlier, this component is a little confusing because this prop is called group, but we're actually referring to a project in this case. Sometimes it would be a group. So we can think of this as more of like the item. And so this item prop has all these attributes that we have access to. So right here, we're saying this dot group, and in the view dev tools, we can see this dot group right here. So these are all the attributes we have access to. And then we're saying this dot group dot visibility. So let's find the visibility attribute that we're referring to, which is here, public. So it's just the string public. And this data is coming from, which I forgot to mention, apologies, but we make an API call when we load this page that gets this data and feeds it to the component. So that's where this data is coming from. So the backend adds this attribute that is the visibility. And in this case, it's public. So we're saying in this object, look up the public key, which is here, and return this string. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I fell for the trick of the group project item thing.
Yeah, apologies for the confusion of this component. This does come up. GitLab is a big code base, and yeah, like any big code base, there is like technical debt. So this type of stuff does come up quite a bit, where there is kind of just a little bit confusing naming. Like in this case, at one point, probably this view only rendered groups, and then we added projects. Updated it to also render projects, but the names of the components never got updated. So, so like in this case, sometime there may already be an issue that exists that says like, let's refactor this code and update the names to make it a little bit less confusing, which could also be a good community contribution. If you were working on this component and we're thinking, oh, this is confusing, you could also open up, or you can search through the issues to see if one exists. And if not, you could also open one up and say, oh, look, these component names are kind of confusing. Here's a proposal to update them, that type of thing. But yeah, so in this case, so now we are rendering the tooltip correctly. And so for most view changes, there will also be a spec, a JavaScript spec test that will also need to update. So we'll want to add a test to make sure that this is working correctly and it doesn't get reverted, or like we don't have any regressions in the future. So the spec should be named the same, the file name _ spec. So group item spec. And then you can see here it is, because this is in the groups components directory. We have groups components group item. There may be a second spec for enterprise edition features, which is the way our code base is set up. We have the base functionality, which is shipped in the community edition, and then any licensed feature is shipped in the enterprise edition, and that has a second file, which is in the EE directory. But in this case, we're just working on the base functionality. It's not any licensed feature. So we would just want the group items. And so, yeah, we have to figure out if there's already a spec that's testing this. Generally, what I like to do is after I make a change, just run the spec and see if it fails. So the way that I run the spec, there's a number of different ways. There's extensions, you can run them in VS Code directly. I just run them in my terminal, but I just copy the relative path. And then if you do yarn, just run the spec. Okay, so it passed, which means we probably didn't have a spec for the tooltip, or we didn't have a very good one. So we'll probably want to refactor or add a spec, but we just have to figure out like where it's actually being tested. And so, yeah, one way we can start is just search for like tooltip, because this is a little bit of a long spec file. So we could read through the whole thing, try and figure out where it's testing this tooltip, but you can also use the search. Doesn't seem to have any like tooltip test in there. You can search for visibility tooltip. Okay, so I think I have like my search to match the case, which is why tooltip didn't come up. But so we have a test that says should render component template correctly. So we would just want to, and then we have a test that's grabbing, let's see, visibility icon. Okay, so it's getting this icon, which is what we had the tooltip on, and it's checking the title attribute, which is what is used for the actual tooltip, it looks like. Yeah. So, and then it's saying to be VM dot. So then it's saying should be this tooltip text. So I think what we need to do is, so this test it's not the best test because it's essentially saying like, grab the title and then check if it's set to this computed property, but this computed property, it's not actually testing any of this logic because it's just checking if it's set to this. So we probably want to update this test. So I think we could probably do a new test that says it should render, or it renders visibility or correct visibility tooltip. And then we could say, so yeah, the tests generally are the hardest part usually. And they all are generally set up fairly about the same, but there are some nuances, especially in some of our older specs. So it can take a little while to like figure out how the specs are working. For myself included, and I work on these a lot. So we just have to figure out what's going on here. Let's see. So I think we want to grab, so we have this create component helper that renders that mounts the component for our, so we can make assertions on it. So I think what we want to do is we want to grab this. So we want to first create the component, this mock group, but we want a project. So oh, there we go. Let's see. So we do have these components. So yeah, this is definitely the hardest part of this fix, is figuring out where we want to put this spec. Because we have these specs for project visibility level down here. And we also have a spec up here that's testing the tooltip. So, and let's see how this. So yeah, so I think what we want to, I think in this case, probably the best thing to do would be, and sometimes I do this where I'll just, before I even actually write out any spec code, I just kind of write out how I want the specs to read. So we basically want the spec to read what we fix. So describe when a group is passed. But we'll say when item is a group. And then we'll say describe when item is a project. And then it renders correct visibility tooltip. And then okay. So yeah, there's, because we added this conditional here, there's basically two different cases that we want to test for. We want to test like when the item is a group or when the item is a project. And so let's do the group first. So by default, it looks like this is, when we do the create component, it's rendering the group type. So we don't need to change anything here. And then we can, so I think what we want to do is we want to just say, we want to say wrapper.find, we want to say expect wrapper dot, and we have these convenience helpers, find by test. So in some cases, it's hard when it's hard to find a specific element in the code when you're testing. You can use this convention of data test ID, and you can say like, let's find this element by this string here. So group visibility icon. defined by test ID. And then we want to test if the attribute title is set correctly. Title to be, and then, so let's see what visibility this group is. Fuck. Group item. Oh. Wait, hold on. Create component. Props data. Okay, yeah. So I think by default, it passes this mock group. If we look at that, it's got a visibility of public. So what we're saying is that we should, so we should expect that this should be the tooltip for this group. So we do, oops, back to the spec. So we can import this from, so we can import this constant and we can say to be public. So we're expecting, and I think I don't want this because that's already passed by default. So let's just comment this out for a sec. And yeah, in Jest you can do it. You can do describe.only to say like, let's only run this test, because this is the only one that we're really we're trying to get to pass at the moment. And yeah, let's just see if that passes. And it does, surprisingly. I generally don't get them to pass my first try, so that's good. But yeah, for the sake of time, since we only have 10 minutes left, let's commit this. So yeah, then I would go on and I would write this test for the project type, and assert that the tooltip is correct for the projects as well. And then we'd have a test that is testing both cases of this conditional. But since we only have 10 minutes left, let's just commit this and open up a merge request just so we can go through that process. And hopefully that kind of helps everyone understand the full flow of contributing. Yeah, you can commit however you like. I prefer to just do it in VS Code because I like the UI of it, but yeah, in this source control tab, I just generally look at the code, make sure it looks correct, add the changes, add a commit message. So in this case, we're fix the project tooltip project, the visibility tooltip for projects. And then you can add, so this line has to be under 72 characters. So we have a bunch of rules for our commit messages. Has to be under 72 characters. And then this is kind of the title, then the description. You can say on the group overview, on the group overview page previously, the tool, the visibility tooltip for projects was incorrect. This commit fixes that. And I just do it in like a new tab in VS Code just so I can see the length and if I make any spelling errors. And then so we have in GitLab, we have change logs. So if you go change log entries, so there's a page in our docs that explains how this works. But essentially, you can add this Git trailer to your commit message. In this case, it is, we're fixing a bug, so we'll add the fixed. And then we'll commit that. Then I go back to my terminal and we'll push this up to the repo. And so yeah, git push origin. In this case, I'm just pushing to the main GitLab repo. In your case, you'd be pushing to a fork. And so yeah, we'll push that up. It'll run. So we have these, and this actually might fail, yeah, because, so we have these pre-push commits or hooks that do some linting for you. And because I commented in that spec, it didn't like it, but I think we can do no verify. So I think you can add the no verify. So like generally I would just fix this before I pushed it up, but for the sake of this demo pairing, I'm just gonna add the no verify flag that skips these pre-push hooks. So yeah, then, so it got pushed up. And then if you go to, so there's two ways you can do it. It'll give you this link here. You can go to that. Or if you go here, it should have this alert like to the main dashboard. So we can create the merge request. And so like if you're creating from a branch or from a fork, it would take you to this, and you'd be targeting from your branch to the GitLab master. But yeah, let's I'm just going to create this, and then yeah, like I mentioned before, it added all the labels for me, which is nice because I used the branch name with the issue at the beginning of it. But yeah, let's actually, let me just go to one more thing. Contributing to GitLab. So yeah, after you created the merge request, so how the community merge requests are triaged. So the community contribution label should be added, and then a merge request coach should be pinged. And if not, you can use the GitLab bot ready command in your merge request. And also, actually, in this case, this isn't ready, so I'm gonna mark it as a draft so that everyone knows that it's not quite ready. We still need to fix that. We still need to finish up this spec here that we have commented out. But yeah, when it is ready, I would use the at GitLab bot ready, and that'll ping a merge request coach. And you can also ping a merge request coach, I believe you can do, at GitLab bot help if you're stuck on something, and then that might ping me or another merge request coach, and I can come in and help you out. Like say you don't know how to finish up that spec. So yeah, we only have a couple minutes left, so that was a lot of talking and information. So hopefully it was helpful for everyone. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I can hopefully answer them in the last couple minutes.
That was super helpful and very detailed. I liked how you went through the entire process, which was extremely useful. I have a question about a general question that you might not know the answer to, Peter, but maybe someone else does. So if you create a fork, or if you use the community fork and you create a branch, and then you create a merge request, then you create another branch and another merge request using the community fork, but you want the upstream branch to be your first branch, like you've made changes based on your first MR. Is there a way to do that, or no, because you're trying to merge into GitLab.com?
Made changes.
So I think I can answer that. And yes, so I think you're sort of looking at creating change, like almost like a chain merge request. So the idea is that the second one only goes in after the first one goes in. So you can set, I think you can set the target of the second one to be the first one's branch, but I don't know if you can change that off the top of my head. I don't know if you can change that later. So I do this occasionally, where you're kind of waiting for one thing to be reviewed, but you want to continue working on the development, so you kind of do the next one. And the upstream, your merge request is going to master upstream, so that's where it kind of now shows you all the changes from your original merge request plus the new one. So then the idea once the first merge request goes in is that you would need to rebase the second one.
Okay, so I can just wait for that and then rebase.
Yeah,
because I know you can edit the branch, like from the GitLab UI. I know you can edit from there, but I just didn't see the option for a GitLab community branch that exists.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I'd be happy to just take a stab at that in the next couple of days and just sort of see if I can figure out how to do it if you want to do it that way. But yeah.
Otherwise, waiting and rebasing is also totally fine, because the first one has to merge anyway before the second one.
And also just when you create that merge request, when you're in the edit merge request view, you can also set a merge request dependency there. You can actually pop the link of your first merge request into that. So it's also a way of just signaling to everyone that this merge request is dependent on another merge request. So yeah, there we go. That field there. So if you pop I think you can just pop the reference, !1234, or the full URL into there, and it'll hard block this merge request on the other merge request being merged first.
Awesome. I didn't realize that. Thank you.
I just want to say thanks to Peter for walking through that issue and merge request. And it's a great example of an issue that seems so simple at the start, but then has some other things come along the way, or then adding tests into. And also you point out a good example of using the GitLab bot help command to get an MR coach in, maybe if you're looking for assistance with writing tests and things like that. It's a good use for that command. So thanks, Peter.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad it was helpful. And yeah, people are welcome to, so I am a merge request coach as well. So you're welcome to just ping me directly if it's on any merge request, but especially if it's group tenant scale. And I can try and help, or if it's above my domain, I can reach out to like a backend engineer and have them help out. So yeah, I can put my, I'll put my, I should link to my GitLab profile somewhere, but I'll just put that in the docs. And yeah, hopefully that's all helpful. And if there are no more questions, we can end it there. And I don't know. I know there are office hours for other teams as well. So if you're interested in that, take a look at I believe they're all on Meetup.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. That was very helpful. Yeah. Any questions from anyone else?
Last question, because I know we're over.
Of
But is becoming a merge request coach something you volunteered for, Peter, or is that a responsibility that rotates throughout all GitLab members?
Yeah, something I'm volunteered for. Let's see if we can find should be
I've got the handbook link
Okay.
right now. I'm going to drop it into the doc. So yeah, it's
yeah. So like when you use @GitLab bot help, I believe it just randomly chooses, or maybe based on the labels, a merge request coach to ping. And yeah, there's front-end engineers, back-end engineers across multiple groups that help out. And they also help with like triaging the community merge requests. And yeah, it's something that some of the engineers volunteer for. And yeah, the responsibility just gets kind of passed around between that group depending on everyone's capacity.
One quick follow-up to that, and one of the responsibilities for MR coaches too is like identifying the labels for issues and merge requests. And I was just thinking about this issue that we walked through. I'm wondering, like, if I had seen that bug, I don't know if I would have known to label it as tenant scale. That wouldn't have immediately come to mind. So I'm wondering, for your group, do you have any tips on identifying something as part of tenant scale or not?
Yeah, good question.
so if you don't mind me jumping in there,
Yeah.
I think it was linked, and the link just may be hidden in the notes further up. There is a link to features by group in Peter's intro at the top. I'll just link it right at the bottom here. So that's a great way to pick it up. Notes, come on, notes, play nicely. So typically, I use this when I'm triaging triaging issues myself. I use this document pretty religiously if I'm trying to find where exactly a certain feature fits in within the grand scheme of things. This doc's a great one to understand which team within GitLab is looking after that particular feature set.
Yep. Yeah, that's super helpful. Another trick that I use sometimes is if you find the feature in the docs, I'll just share my screen quickly. But yeah, that page is super helpful. But if you find the feature in the docs, say like groups, and then if you just go to the bottom and click page source, so all our docs should have a stage and a group listed at the top. So if the issue is about groups and you go to the groups section in the docs and click edit, it'll say group tenant scale and the stage, and that should be true for all the features in our docs, hopefully. So they should be categorized by groups. That's another way you can identify which group owns a feature.
Great, thanks. Great suggestions. Appreciate it.
Sounds good. Well, should we wrap up? And thanks everyone for coming. And yeah, we'll see you next time or at one of the other meetups for one of the other groups.
Yeah, and don't forget, we're currently mid hackathon, so it's hackathon week this week. Missy, I'm sure you've got something in the works, if not more than one, as well as Marco. Zenzi, if you have not yet had a chance to contribute to GitLab, now's a fantastic time. We're accepting MRs. We've got a hackathon open at the moment. I'll drop a link to the hackathon in the chat too. And yeah, if you also haven't joined our community Discord, now's a great time to join that too, because there's plenty of chat and a great way to connect with other contributors.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks everyone for showing up. Thanks, Peter.